Thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. U.S. President Donald Trump slams war critics, vows it's saving the world from what he describes as death and destruction if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon. Mixed reactions in South Africa and Mexico following a dramatic 2-0 World Cup opening match. Plus, European right-wing leaders demand EU chief's resignation over decline of Europe. Welcome to the program, everyone. We begin in the United States, where President Donald Trump has condemned critics of his foreign policy over the Middle East conflict, vowing that Washington is saving the world from what he describes as death and destruction if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon. Speaking in the Oval Office, President Trump added that a deal with Iran could be signed imminently. He noted that while he would not be present at the signing, the U.S. would be represented by Vice President J.D. Vance. The comments follow President Trump's announcement last night that he had cancelled planned military strikes against Tehran.
If you look at Biden, his oil prices, without saving our country, saving the world, by going out and saying to Iran, you cannot have a nuclear weapon. If I ask these people about Iran having a nuclear weapon and they're going to have to go through some pain, I mean, I don't think, I hate to really do it because it's a little dangerous. Every one of these people are going to say, you cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. He said, use it. You want to see turmoil? You want to see death and destruction? Let Iran have a nuclear weapon. I don't want to say a deadline because if I say a deadline, you'll say, oh, he didn't meet the deadline. You know, this is like, it's not going to matter much because it's going to get signed and the strait is open. But the straits have been open for a number of months already and you just didn't know about it. You know, you as reporters weren't able to get it. I just announced yesterday that but it's been up, oil's dropped. Oil will start coming down to, I think, even lower than it was before. I said I was in Iowa. It was $1.85 a gallon. And I don't know if I'm going to get there, but we're going to get pretty close. It's going to come down, and when oil comes down, everything else comes down. And most importantly, we have a deal that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, which was the whole purpose of what we had to go through to get this. So it was a big, very big thing. But we have a signing soon, and the documents are in pretty final shape. So we'll see. We'll see. Very good. Should be done. That should be done pretty quickly. They want it every bit as much as everybody else wants it. And I think a lot of good relationships can ensue from this. I just spoke with the leaders of many of the countries that were mentioned in the release. I just spoke to Bibi. I spoke to the great heads of nations, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and others.
Meanwhile, Iran has rejected U.S. claims that a deal is imminent. A deal has been reached to end the war following statements from President Trump stating that a final decision is imminent. Earlier, President Trump announced that the U.S. will strike Iran very hard, but the later cancelled the military action, claiming that negotiators had just made a great settlement with Tehran. Addressing reporters, the president said the agreement is subject to the finalization of documents, which should be completed over the next few days. He added that there would probably be a signing ceremony in Europe. However, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei refuted those claims, describing them as speculative and adding that nothing has been finalized just as yet. Let's douse the tensions a little bit. The 2026 World Cup has officially begun with Mexico thrashing South Africa in the opening World Cup match between both countries. Some Bafana fans have expressed optimism, noting that Argentina, the reigning World Cup champions, also lost their opening match before going on to win the tournament. Some supporters criticized the team's performance, expressing their disappointment with Bafana and noting that the South African nation still has a lot of work to do. While Mexico dominated much of the encounter, some South African fans who spoke to our correspondent Innocent Samusa questioned the team's tactical approach and blamed coaching decisions for the disappointing result.
The first game for them, they might be a bit stiff. They'll get it right. Let's forgive our boys, guys. Like, I forgave them.
I think they need to change a lot of things. They're not playing as a team. They need a lot of things to be done. To be honest, it's just we can't handle the pressure. First game of the World Cup in Mexico's hometown. I just think our boys are a little pressurized. But give it some time. Next game we'll get it.
Meanwhile, the story is entirely different in Mexico, where thousands of fans gathered at the Angel of Independence Monument in Mexico City to celebrate their 2-0 victory over South Africa in the opening match. Despite rain falling across parts of the capital, hundreds of fans remain on the streets to continue the celebrations following that historic win at the Estadio de Mexico. While celebrating, some supporters recalled several missed opportunities by the Mexican team, stressing that the match could have ended with a wider scoreline. Authorities have closed roads around the Independence Monument to accommodate the growing crowds as celebrations continued into the night. Mexico is hosting the 2026 FIFA World Cup alongside the United States and Canada, the largest edition of the tournament's history, featuring 48 national teams. Following its victory over South Africa, the Mexican national team will return to action on June 18 to face South Korea for their second Group A match.
Pues la verdad es que yo no lo había vivido, solamente lo escuchaba por mis padres, tíos, y hoy viví.
No quiero hablar de expectativas, porque para mí expectativa tienen los equipos que...
Well, Paraguay and the United States will meet at the Sophie Stadium in Los Angeles on Friday, still on the World Cup. Los Angeles is hosting match day 2 as Paraguay head coach Gustavo Alfaro warned that La Albiroja faces a tough challenge against the United States. He insists that he is not interested in building false expectations, saying that luxury is reserved for nations packed with elite-level talent. Paraguay and the United States will face off at Sophie Stadium later on today. Well, the United States is agog with the matches being played at the FIFA World Cup. Let's cross over to our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, great to see you. I can imagine what an atmosphere it must be in the United States. A lot of tourists coming in to watch some of the matches played, as the United States is a co-host of this year's World Cup. But there were a few controversies. The Somali referee who was denied entry into the United States, the perceived discrimination of African teams at the airports, where some were scrutinized on the tarmac at airports, the tensions between the U.S. and South Africa, the U.S. and Iran, and the fact that fan clubs were not issued visas into the United States. Is this a World Cup many Americans look forward to hosting at all?
Yes. Well, you know, first and foremost, Americans are extremely excited about the World Cup. The World Cup has been something that has been a long time coming. And so the excitement is just exuding and exuberant all across the U.S., even in cities where the World Cup is not actually being held. And so, you know, that is the first area. And as we're celebrating 250 years in the United States, Washington is one of those cities, even though there's not a game being held here, that many are excited to visit after they go to the Cup games in other parts of the country. So it's an exciting time. But to your question really around some of the visas visas that have not been moved forward, some individuals that have been denied entry into the U.S. As you know, we are in very difficult times. Immigration has been at the forefront of the president's conversation. We have definitely put a lot of restrictions around immigration into the United States. This is a very challenging time to have some of these restrictions around individuals that can come in and out of the country, as we're looking at being one of the co-hosts of the World Cup. So that is something I think that many Americans, many who live here, are very concerned about, due to the fact that this has prohibited many individuals from being able to move things forward. So, we're in a time that whether or not it's dealing with visa rejections or whether or not it's dealing directly with individuals that have said that they have the appropriate protocols in place to move forward and to come into the country, but they have not been allowed entry.
Right, and for many countries hosting the World Cup, those who had hosted in the past, there were expectations of higher GDP that year, more revenues for businesses, and all that. How is that looking like in America with all of these visa restrictions? I would think that the United States will have been more flexible with the expected volume of tourists that will come into the country just because it's a co-host of the World Cup.
Yes, and as we know that the decisions around where the World Cup is held it occurs many years before. We unfortunately, this is a time where, as we know, the whole world is impacted by the conflict between the U.S., Iran, and Israel. And obviously the Ukraine war, Russia, that has also been an impact on the entire world. And so as we think about what could have been done, I think you're exactly correct. I don't know if the administration was as prepared for what that would look like and some of the implications of some of the regulations and rules that have been put in place over the last 6 months, or implementing some of the immigration laws that were in place previously but might have been relaxed some. And so I think that we're going to definitely have a lot of lessons learned from this process, as there have been so many new changes to the immigration policies.
I suppose, one of the many things, people will be looking out for would be the Iranian team and their matches. They are being hosted by neighboring Mexico. As concerns grow in America about security and terrorism, what measures have been put in place to safeguard lives and property during the competition? I don't suppose the Iranian national team would be causing any trouble, really.
Yes, well, as you can see, the president has been very keen on addressing the conflict in Iran. He believes that they're coming to a peace deal quickly, and that is not just because of what he promised. I think, to your point, it's thinking about the global, and especially right now, we're in a time where thousands upon thousands, millions of people are engaged in this World Cup. And so, as we think about, to your point of safety and security, being able to reduce conflict is going to be the number one priority. And so that is where the actual armed forces have been put in place. Even if we think about even some of our local, we've recently also had the NBA finals where they've had to put a lot of additional security measures. And so those individuals who are working along with the armed forces, individuals who are with our police officers, are definitely being put into place. Secret services, obviously, in an intelligence area. This is one of the reasons for the president's swift move around building up and bringing forth someone to lead the intelligence agency, because that is one of the number one ways that they're trying to ensure safety and security for all Americans and for all of those visitors who are also here in the United States.
Right, and speaking of the relationship, or let me say the sour relationship between Iran and the United States, some of the latest issues, this is outside of the World Cup, but, related. The U.S. president hinted at the possibility or the idea that there's an imminent deal with Iran to end this, crisis in the Middle East. Iran says, no, there's none. And, what's happening? Is it or is it not, Maria?
We are only hearing from the president, which is saying that there is. He's saying he's speaking with individuals that are a high level within the government in Iran that are ensuring that we are moving forward. I think we'll be very surprised. I think that the question is really going to be around how much there can be some. I think we're going to potentially have to see some additional engagement from other countries to help to barter this deal. And so as we begin to see more of a coalition approach to the end, I think that will begin to let us signify that there are movement toward a deal. But I think that both parties have wanted to move forward with a peace deal. It's just about being able to come to agreement. So we hope that obviously that the president does have some ways to move forward, and hopefully the Iranian government will receive the information that is needed to be able to move forward with some sort of a communication, at least that both sides can at least agree that they are communicating with one another to move toward a peace deal.
Right. Thanks again, Maria. And still ahead on the program. Welcome back. European right-wing leaders Jordan Bardella and Vlaams Belang, leader from Tom van Grieken, are calling for the resignation of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen over what they describe as the decline of Europe. During a joint press conference in Brussels, they criticized her leadership, saying she does not represent the sovereign will of the European people. Meanwhile, the National Rally leader Bardella pledged to curb migration and promised the French what he describes as the greatest electoral rendezvous if he wins next year's presidential election.
The personification, what is completely wrong with this European Union. She does not represent what the sovereign will is of the people in Europe. Is it the first thing, hypothetically, normally I never answer on hypothetical questions, that we should force to do? That I do not think so. The most important thing is to gain back control over our sovereignty, and she is a part of it at all, but not the main target. But at the end, she should go, and she shouldn't be there at the first place.
This week, a major trade exhibition for the aerospace and defense industries takes place in Berlin. The ILA Air Show has become increasingly focused on defense in recent years as Europe pivots more and more towards that sector, with drone technology becoming ever more of a central focus. For more, we're joined by DW correspondent Arthur Sullivan. Arthur, great to see you. How big a deal is this air show? Is it just a spectacle, or is there serious business going on?
So this event is held every 2 years. It claims to be the world's oldest air show, with origins going all the way back to 1909. So it is a big event. It is a big spectacle. There is certainly that element to it. But it is not just all fun and games. It's an important global gathering for the aerospace and defence sectors. And defence is an increasingly important part of that, given the massive increase in commitment to spend in that sector from European governments over the last few years. The list of companies operating and exhibiting at this event this week is really a who's who of the global aviation and defence sectors. Obviously, European companies dominate, but there are many US and many international companies here. But primarily, it is an opportunity for the European defence sector to show its muscle and its capability to manufacture at a time when companies are looking to narrow the gap with their US rivals and try and benefit from this defence spending boom that is going on.
Arthur, the show has been overshadowed by the collapse this week of the fighter jet program between France and Germany. As the air show kicks off, what's the mood in the European defence sector?
Yeah, so that news regarding the FCAS fighter jet program between France, Germany, and indeed also Spain, another partner, was definitely not the kind of morale booster the sector would have liked to have had before the event. But at the same time, that news was not really a surprise, because that project has looked doomed for a while due to disagreements between the companies at the centre of it, between the French and German companies. So it was a corporate dispute rather than one between the governments. And the governments say they would still look to work together and collaborate on joint defence projects as much as possible, particularly in the areas of AI-enabled drone technology and cloud technology in terms of defence. But to answer your question, it is a mixed picture in terms of the overall mood in European defence at present, because while increased defence spending and indeed commitments to spend have given a new lease of life to a lot of companies within the sector, It's provided opportunities for startups and indeed for older manufacturers pivoting to defence. There are also question marks over how effective the spending is and indeed how sustainable it is. So in terms of that question of effectiveness, is it in the right areas? Is it focused sufficiently on innovative technology, especially that drone technology, so crucial in the war in Ukraine and indeed the war in Iran? And also in terms of that thing of sustainability, can governments really afford the commitments they have been made? Because there's doubts about that in recent times. Some people are starting to wonder, will governments follow through on the huge commitment they've made to spend certain percentages of their budgets on defence? And there has also been criticism here in Germany that what has been spent has too much been on classic military hardware like tanks and not enough in innovative tech which boosts the economy in the longer term. And when we talk about that, we really talk a lot about drone technology, AI-enabled drone tech.
Right, and drone tech, as you say, is a major focus at this year's show. How much progress has Europe made with this increasingly vital defense technology?
Certainly the Ukraine war and the Iran war have shown the world how vital drone and anti-drone tech have become. And this year's ILA does showcase many European startups and firms who are focused on these areas and who are increasingly attracting the attention of investors, some would say even more so than some of those more traditional defence stocks in recent months. So just to give you an insight into that sector, some deals have been done this week. We've seen that Airbus, that's a major European defence and aerospace company, they did a deal with a small French anti-drone company called Alta Ares, looking to meet the demand in Europe for these strong air defence systems. That company, that French company, uses AI to enhance its ammunition to intercept and destroy drones. It's already been used by the Ukrainian forces in the war over there. And it's exactly the kind of tech that Europe wants to become a leader in. And there are lots of other success stories on display this week. We have the German drone startup Stark. They're exhibiting this week. They make so-called kamikaze drones, and they've attracted the interest of the US tech billionaire Peter Thiel. There's also lots of other success stories, including from here in Germany, startups such as Helsing and Quantum Systems. They're increasingly focused on using artificial intelligence to develop drone technology, and it is attracting investment, particularly from across the Atlantic, more so than in Europe. But there is a hope that events like this will highlight how much advancements are being made in this sector by European firms, and what needs to then follow is the financial commitment from investors, and indeed that governments would follow through on the commitments they have made to further boost this sector.
Arthur, thanks again. Well, that's our show this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joke Rogers. Bye for now.